If you work as a manufacturing facilities engineer, installing a new piece of equipment can be as complex as the machinery itself. From prep work to alignment and testing, it's your team's job to put it all together. That's why it's good to have Grainger on your side. With industrial-grade products and next-day delivery, Grainger helps ensure you have everything you need close at hand through every step of the installation. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
You know that moment, something big happens, or, well, maybe might be happening, and you just get that urge, Grab your phone, type it straight into the search bar. We all do it.
Absolutely. It's basically our reflex now for understanding what's going on. What does it all mean?
Well, today we're diving into a topic that clearly sparked a lot of that exact kind of curiosity. The passing of Pope Francis in 2025.
Yeah.
And just the wave of questions that follow an event like that. So momentous.
Exactly. And we're trying to look, a bit deeper than just the headlines, aren't we? We've got the news article, sure, the formal story.
Right.
Maybe even more interesting, we've looked at the raw stuff, the unfiltered questions people were actually typing online.
Yeah, those search queries, things like, next pope or conclave, they give us this amazing, real-time picture of what's genuinely on people's minds. So our mission here really is to get past just reporting the news and really understand the main things people were interested in, concerned about when thinking about the Pope's passing and, the whole papal succession thing.
It was fascinating, right away, is just how many questions were laser focused on Pope Francis himself. Really direct stuff.
Like what specifically jumped out at you?
Well, the most common ones were incredibly blunt. Pope Francis' death. Did the Pope die? Even just, is the Pope dead?
Wow.
It just really shows that basic human need for, immediate factual answers when things feel uncertain.
It's quite striking, isn't it? It's not just vague worry. It's a hunt for a yes or no.
Precisely. And you see that urgency ramped up in searches that pin down dates like Pope died 2025 or did the Pope die on Easter? That kind of specificity, even when, maybe there wasn't official news yet when they searched, it just highlights how fast information or maybe misinformation can spread and become this focus point online.
Right. People are trying to nail down a moment in time, even if the details aren't fully out there yet. And it wasn't just the immediate life or death question, was it? Health concerns were popping up, too.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Searches for Pope Francis' health were pretty common. And we even saw specific terms like pneumonia showing up. Now, obviously, it's crucial to say a search term isn't a diagnosis.
No, of course not.
But it absolutely reflects worries that were floating around or maybe rumors people were trying to check out.
So, okay, we can't take those as medical fact, but they point to a specific area people were worried about. And really underneath it all, just the sheer number of, is Pope Francis still alive? Searches.
Yeah.
It just hammers home that central question, driving so much of that initial curiosity.
And it wasn't just about the present moment either. There was also a noticeable interest in the timeline of events. Even hypothetical ones.
What kind of timing questions were you seeing?
A lot of, when did Pope Francis die?
Whoa.
What time did the Pope die?
Ah.
What day did Pope Francis die? It's almost like people are mentally bracing themselves for the news, trying to fit it into a specific structure, even before anything's official.
That's a really good point. It's like a collective attempt to build a timeline in their heads. And that focus on when also stretched to his time in office, didn't it?
Exactly. Searches like, how long was Pope Francis Pope, and when did Pope Francis become Pope? They suggest people want to place his papacy in context, understand how long it lasted in the bigger picture, maybe as a way to grasp the weight of potential change.
Right, to sort of frame his time as Pope as we think about what comes next. But the searching definitely didn't end with just questions about Pope Francis. There was a very clear, very quick shift towards the future.
Oh, absolutely. The focus snapped pretty fast to who might succeed him.
The searches really showed that anticipation, didn't they? I mean, phrases like who will be the next pope, new pope, who's the new pope, they were everywhere. And then even more specific ones like who will be the next pope after Pope Francis and who will succeed Pope Francis. That succession question was obviously huge.
It's a remarkably fast pivot, isn't it? From worrying about the current pope to intense guesswork about his successor.
Yeah.
And tied right into that is how often the word conclave popped up in searches.
Conclave. Okay. For anyone listening who might not be totally sure, can you give us a quick rundown? What is that?
Sure. So the conclave is the traditional and very secret meeting of the College of Cardinals.
Got it.
They get together specifically to elect a new pope. It's this ancient ritual, super strict rules about secrecy and, the famous white smoke signaling they've picked someone.
Sorry, the white smoke.
It all creates this moment of intense global focus.
Okay. So not just some casual vote, it's a specific historical process. And people were also digging into the timing of this conclave too, right?
Absolutely. Tons of queries like, when will the next pope be elected? When will the conclave begin? When does the conclave start? And even, how long does it take to elect a new pope? This shows people get that picking a new pope isn't instant. It follows a set procedure, and there's usually an expected time frame.
So there's definitely an awareness of a process, a timeline involved, and then naturally the speculation kicks in. Who are the likely candidates?
Exactly. The guessing game begins. Looking at the search data, we saw several names popping up a lot. Luis Antonio Tecolo, sometimes spelled Cardinal Tagle.
Okay.
Cardinal Dolan, Cardinal Kevin Farrell, Cardinal Sarah Pietro Parolin. Sometimes that came up as Cardinal Petro Parolin.
Interesting variations.
Yeah, and Timothy Dolan, sometimes just Timothy Dolan.
Right, these are definitely names you hear often in discussions about potential successors, the papabili, as they sometimes call them.
The popables.
Exactly. It's that informal term for cardinals, seen as potential candidates. The fact these names show up so much in searches probably just reflects the media coverage and expert opinions people are seeing.
And it wasn't only specific names. There were also broader searches, showing just a general interest in the whole field of potential candidates.
What kind of broader searches did you see?
Phrases like next pope candidates, who is likely to be the next pope, candidates for next pope, and even just who will replace Pope Francis.
Right.
It suggests people are trying to get a handle on who's in the running, what the overall landscape looks like.
It really does feel like this global guessing game, trying to predict the next leader for the Catholic Church. We even saw searches like next pope odds, like people are trying to handicap the race.
Well, that's a natural human thing, isn't it? Trying to predict big outcomes.
It's true.
And those perceived odds, they often reflect a mix of things, someone standing in the church hierarchy, their perceived influence, that sort of thing.
Now, you mentioned context earlier, and it's interesting how we also saw searches looking back at previous popes.
Yes, that historical angle is quite telling.
We saw searches for Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict XVI, his immediate predecessors, and specifically questions about Pope Benedict's death, like when did Pope Benedict die?
Yeah, and simpler ones too, like who was the pope before Pope Francis? Even the phrase, the two popes, which, could be about the movie.
Right, the film.
Just that time when both Benedict and Francis were alive. These look-back searches, they suggest people are trying to place Pope Francis within the longer story of the papacy.
Exactly. It's like trying to understand his time in relation to recent history, maybe draw comparisons with the popes before him.
Yeah.
It gives a framework for understanding his papacy, maybe even for thinking about what qualities might be looked for next.
And it's not just past popes. There were also searches digging into Pope Francis's own personal background.
Oh, yeah. Like what kind of details were people looking for?
His birth name, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, came up a lot. Along with Argentina and Buenos Aires, where he's from. And the term Jesuit also appeared quite frequently. These context searches are pretty key to understanding the person behind the title. Being a Jesuit, for instance, that's a huge part of his theological view, his leadership style, how he engages with social issues.
That's a really important point. The Jesuit order has such a distinct history.
Exactly. Known for intellectual rigor, commitment to social justice. It definitely informs his approach.
Yeah, his background clearly shaped his papacy. Now, switching back to the actual process, the mechanics of what happens next.
Right.
We saw plenty of questions about that too.
Yes. Definitely a public curiosity about how the church actually works, governance-wise. Searches like, what happens when the pope dies, how do they pick a new pope, and how do they choose a new pope, were really common.
It really shows people want to understand the nuts and bolts of the church during such a critical moment.
Precisely. And seeing terms like College of Cardinals and Papal Conclave pop up shows there's at least some public awareness of the key groups involved. Right. The College of Cardinals, just for clarity, is that group of senior clergy, mostly bishops, the Pope appoints. They're his main advisors, and crucially, they're the ones who elect his successor.
And it seems like location was also on people's minds during this time.
Yes, Several key spots within the Vatican were searched for often.
Like where exactly?
Well, obviously Vatican and Vatican City were big,
Sure.
but also more specific places like Casa Santa Marta, which is where Pope Francis lives, the Sistine Chapel, the iconic spot for the conclave, and St. Peter's Basilica. These places are just so central to the church administration, worship, history, so it makes total sense they'd feature heavily in searches during a potential transition.
They're the physical heart of it all. And maybe unsurprisingly, news outlets played a massive role.
Oh, absolutely. The searches were just loaded with references to all sorts of news organizations.
We saw the generic stuff like news and breaking news, right?
Yeah.
But also very specific outlets: CNN, Vatican News, ABC, BBC, National Catholic Register, Reuters, AP, Fox News, CBS, New York Times, NYT too.
Yeah, Newsmax, EWTN, Yahoo, lots of them.
NBC, Associated Press. Just a huge list. And then direct searches, too, like Pope Francis News and even Papa Francisco News.
That sheer volume and the variety of news sources mentioned just underlines the huge global interest.
Totally.
People rely heavily on the media for updates about his health and any potential change. It also maybe suggests people are looking for different angles, comparing sources.
Yeah, casting a wide net to stay informed. Now, some of the related names and topics that surfaced were pretty interesting, too.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, we saw searches like J.D. Vance meets Pope. And then questions spinning off that, like, is J.D. Vance Catholic? It kind of shows how events involving the Pope can cross over into, wider political chat, sparking curiosity about connections between public figures and the church.
Yeah, that makes sense. Encounters between the Pope and political figures often get a lot of attention. It highlights his role on the world stage beyond just religion.
And then there was that really fascinating search term, the last Pope.
The last Pope. Yeah, that likely taps into all sorts of prophecies, maybe more esoteric stuff.
Right.
Reflecting a more, let's say, unconventional kind of curiosity about the papacy.
Connecting to those old prophecies and ideas. We also saw a lot of searches that felt more personal about Pope Francis himself.
What kind of personal things were people looking up?
Things like Pope Francis quotes, his teachings, his age, Pope Francis' age, even Pope Francis' net worth, which always seems like a slightly odd one in this context, but it pops up. Also searches about his recent activities, Pope Francis' last appearance, his final words, Pope Francis' last words, and even the pretty somber question, where will Pope Francis be buried?
Those personal searches, they just show a natural human interest in the person holding such a massive role. People are curious about his life, his ideas, and yes, the details around his eventual passing, including those traditions like papal burial.
And finally, we also saw those broader general terms like just popes, pope history, and Catholic Church showing a kind of baseline interest in the whole institution.
Right.
And then loads of very direct, almost informal searches like Pope dead, Pope dies, Pope passed away. Plus, actually, a surprising number of typos and variations on his name, like Pope Francos, Pope Fernassus, all sorts.
Yeah, that huge range of searches, from the very formal to the super casual, the specific to the general. It really highlights two things, doesn't it?
What's that?
One, the enduring global fascination with the papacy as an institution.
Yeah.
And two, that very immediate, almost urgent need for up-to-the-minute info during a time of potential change.
Okay, so pulling this all together, after digging through all these searches in the news context, what are the main takeaways? What does it all tell us?
I think you can boil it down to a few key areas of intense public focus. First, there's that very immediate direct concern about Pope Francis' status. The basic question, is he still alive?
Right, the fundamental question.
Second, if a transition is happening, there's a huge focus on the timing. When did it happen, or when might it? Third, a clear curiosity about the process, or the complex, maybe slightly mysterious process of picking a new pope, especially the conclave. And finally, maybe the most visible thing is just widespread speculation about who's next, who are the front runners.
So immediate status, timing, the selection process, and potential successors.
Exactly. These search patterns, they really give us this fascinating, unfiltered peek into the global consciousness around such a key figure and, well, such a historically huge institution.
Yeah.
It shows this mix, people wanting clear, fast information, but also being aware of and curious about these long-established procedures. And, of course, that very human habit of looking ahead and wondering what's coming.
It really is a snapshot of a world watching, waiting, and wondering, isn't it? So maybe for everyone listening, as you keep following the news, maybe doing your own searches, just think about the incredible historical weight, the global impact of choosing a new leader for over 1 billion people.
Yeah.
It's this ancient process playing out right now in our super modern, super connected world. Hopefully this deep dive has given you a bit more insight into the kinds of questions being asked and maybe why they matter.